get a haircut, Nick? Looks cute. Looks fresh.
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah.
She's called Monica and she comes from Slovakia.
Done a lovely
she rides
job.
in a motor car.
We're going to talk about Nick's haircut unless we get any questions. So.
That was my question. That was a really important question I needed to bring up.
Exactly. That was Anna's question.
So I had to ask her, did she know Melania? Did she know where Melania came from? And she said, she doesn't come from Slovakia. She doesn't. I got it wrong. She comes from Slovenia.
I didn't know that.
No.
Now we all know.
Giles.
Yes. Hello.
Jim.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We've lost Ariane. She's disappeared. She was.
Anna's gone dry or milky.
No.
Yeah. Always the milky tea.
I finished the bottle already. No, I didn't start it this evening. So I've got to stick. I'm not going to go for another one. You got a question? Excellent.
Hey,
hey. So it's from Julie and Chris. So I'm asking to unmute you now, so you've got to unmute yourself, and then you can ask.
Hey, thank you. Hi, Anna. Nice to see you.
Hello.
Nice to see you all. We feel like we've just stepped out of your room into this, having just finished watching it. Really, we came down for the London performance. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yes.
Great. It was a question for Nick, directing it. I've just wondered, having directed the kind of just the stage version when we came down to see it in London, compared to directing the filmed stage version, so to speak. I just wondered how different it was.
Well, it's really useful to have done the stage thing because the problem with film generally is that you don't get there with very much rehearsal when you shoot something. I mean, you can, but it's quite rare that. So to have all that bedded in, so that Anna and the musicians and Clare and Giles and Joy and Ariane, for them to know each other and have performed it, that's a huge boost, Then it was a question because of scale. I mean, finding a place, and we were quite lucky. We stumbled on the Asylum in where is it, Claire? Which part of England?
In Peckham, near
near
Lewisham.
Yeah. And when I say asylum, apparently you mustn't think of mad people. It's asylum in the political sense. It's a place where vintners sent their ex-pubby people to live out their lives. And in the middle of this almshouse setting, there is this derelict church. So to find that, and with all its textures and
it's gorgeous,
kind of evocation of something in the past, was much more interesting than trying to find a medieval castle or anything like that.
Yeah. And it had its own kind of like nooks and crannies when we were looking for a place that could be this or it could be that. It kind of naturally came around the story, which is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, she suddenly pops up above a brick wall. So she's in Twelfth Night or something,
Yeah.
Just in terms of our experience, having seen it in London, we felt that we kind of totally got it this time round. And I don't know if it took the pandemic to have it filmed, but it really is a blessing to have had it filmed, because we felt that we totally got it from beginning to end. Whereas I don't know if we got it all, the first time round. We got the feeling of it, the evocative nature of the whole thing.
Yeah.
The rough gist of the story, but
I think the intimacy of the camera, someone talking directly to you can make it a lot clearer in some ways.
It's really funny. I remember
you can shape it in another way. Most actors hate directors in film because they know they're going to be taken and put in another way in some way. But
no, I like
you can do that sympathetically, and you have to follow a narrative, and it allows you to follow a narrative in a very particular way. I mean, theatre is still a fantastic tool for emotional response, you know. And I think probably what you might be carrying, having seen the film now, what you might be carrying in your, you know, in your body a bit, in your head, is what you saw originally, you know, that mood. And, you know, we've played in various churches, and I can still remember the first performance in Oxford, which had practically no light. It was in broad daylight.
Yeah.
You know,
in a huge space.
Yeah, but in a huge space. But you know, each situation can bring its own magic, really.
Yeah.
I think for me, what I really love about the film that you don't get in the same way, and you can't get in the same way when it's done live, is the way that Anna, you're able to address the camera.
Yeah.
And when we were doing the script development at one stage, early on, when she has that question about, should I sing this song, shouldn't I sing this song, why not, I think we were talking about how it was a bit like Mrs. Maisel, if you've seen Mrs. Maisel on Netflix.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's really brought out much more by that filmic quality, which you can't really do in the same way live, of being able to address the audience and really getting a sense that you're in her head. Because I think when I write stuff, it is about being in the character's head, and in a way that this medium kind of suits it better in that respect.
All of the little kind of cheeky asides and the stuff that is like little quips, they really come out more on the camera one than yeah. I would have more of a tricky job having to like project aside to, like, you know, 50 people, where with the camera you can kind of just literally do that quite subtly. Yeah.
Intimacy.
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I obviously want to, you know, give other people an opportunity to ask questions. I've got lots of things in my mind, but I'll wait my turn. But thank you for answering that. Thank you, Nick.
No, don't wait your turn. Keep
Has anyone got any others? Do we have any others, Steph?
I think it'll be back to you, Chris, in a minute.
It might be back to you.
Yes, we do have one other question from Monica.
From Monica, excellent.
My hairdresser. Is that my hairdresser? That Monica?
No, different Monica. I'm actually in Winnipeg, not Slovakia or Slovenia or wherever.
Oh wow! Hi.
So I was curious about your use of Reyes Glorious, because I've always heard of that as being the song by the watch person who's, you know, wanting their you know, who's keeping watch while his friend and his lady are together, and wanting them to, like, come on, get up, the jealous husband's going to come. So I was curious. So when I saw it in the script, I was almost expecting that, oh, Isabella's going to be singing this, and I kind of went, no, oh, okay. So you sort of took a completely different take on it, which I found interesting. So maybe that's.
I think that one's probably for me. Unless anyone else wants to jump in.
It works for the script. It works for the script. So I was just.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. It's a shame Ariane's not turned up, because she has a different interpretation of that song from me. And I see it very much as the different verses are kind of different places in the relationship, I'd say. And I don't see it as the Watchman. There's nothing in the narrative that says that particularly, but it's more about how it's he, obviously, in the song. It's about it's sung from a man's perspective, but that he is going through the different stages of what the dawn means in their relationship, is how I see it.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh no, it made sense in the comment. So it was just sort of an interesting thing, because I haven't seen it presented that way before. So it was kind of okay, well, but it works. It works. So I was just sort of interested in that.
It's a very interesting concept, isn't it? About the length of the night. You know, the length of the night that then becomes the enemy of lovers. I mean, it goes all the way back. And is it not? Is it Ovid, I think, who has a line which is then quoted in Christopher Marlowe's Dr. Faustus in the very final scene when he's about to be taken down to Hades, And he uses this particular line, "Lenti, lenti, curate noctis et qui," slowly, slowly, please, slowly run the horses of the night. And this whole concept, which, I mean, it's way before medieval, that, you know.
And well, it comes up in Romeo and Juliet too. That's
It
an obvious
does.
place
And
it comes
well,
up too.
I mean, he got it from the Latins, didn't he? I mean, he read them. I mean, so it's kind of, it's an extraordinary theme for.
It's a genre. It's a whole genre of song. I mean, Giles, you were actually in a group called Alva.
Yes, that's
you
right.
You probably have something to say about this.
The whole group named after it.
Did you play very
named
slowly?
after the genre. Yeah.
Giles, did you play very, very slowly?
Yeah.
So that the night would go on and on and on.
There are albas, you know, which is the name of the dawn songs in lots of different cultures as well. I mean,
I think it's my favorite.
kind of
One of my favorite ones. There's two of my favorites, and that one was definitely one of them. I like the way that it's like interspliced with the dialogue as well. Was really helpful for me. I remember when we were filming that section, we ended up getting Ariane to sing in amongst the lines, even though the camera wasn't on her at that point, just to help the mood, because it was really I just kind of needed that back from the live in a way, that because it's just so evocative. It is such really, you know, when the line says I'm filled with this sadness, it really does feel sad in a good way.
There's something about that tune as well, isn't it? I mean, that really hits the spot, that tune.
Yeah, totally.
It is. You know, it was a very influential piece.
But, I mean, so much of this music does, but it's. I think the old problem of, you know, when you're looking at music which is way outside one's own natural territory, you know, in terms of age and so on, it does. I can tell you, if you want to get to know this music and love it, edit a show with it in, because you hear it again and again and again. And it is the very fact of the repetition, which is kind of part of the medieval experience, because they didn't dash away to go and look at the telly. I mean, they dashed away to knock Normans on their head and all that kind of thing. But, you know, and there was sports and so on. But in cultural terms, you know, I mean, they didn't have a big theatre. So the repetition of these songs, and the way that I've been told that in China there's that whole tradition of, in a pub, there's a man in a corner who sings songs, and you come back and sing songs again and again, and you get it in Irish pubs in the, you know, out in the Gaeltacht, out in the west. The songs are sung again and again, and it's through that familiarity that a lot of the emotional oomph appears, and you begin to understand it each time. So, Chris, when you say, you know, now you've got more out of it, I think that's part of it as well. You've got to go back to this kind of music, you know, in a way that you don't have to go back necessarily to a bit of rap. You know, I mean, it's there in the moment and it's gone, and that's fine, and that's its life story. But, you know, this. Yeah, I know what you mean. This is bedded in. What do you think, Anna? I mean, that's, you know, once it gets in you understand the music.
Totally. And having it within context changes the way you listen to something. I think, you know, if you heard all of that music on the radio versus hearing someone, or A, sing it live, and B, in the context of it being written and why it was written and what it was written for, it makes such a difference.
Well, it's what Paulo Pera says, you know, I won't have to tell you, you will know.
Yeah, you will
know. You know, and
I like that.
You know, one day you'll get it. Now, you know, I mean, you know, Mozart could have said that to one of his less forward pupils, couldn't he? Don't ask me how to end a piece. When you do it, you'll know you've done it.
It'll happen.
It's kind of true of all art, isn't it? Really.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I wrote the piece. And this is the first concert play that I wrote back in 2010, and I wrote it because I love the troubadour repertoire. But actually, it is kind of, if you don't know it, it's very hard to find a way into it, because it's kind of quite codified, and the language is quite dense, and it's obviously in this you know, in Occitan, this strange language that people don't know.
Yeah, even in English. Yeah.
So I kind of wanted, and I didn't want it to be academic. I wanted it to be, because the songs are very heartfelt, you know, in a way, that was what kind of gave me the concert play format, was that I wanted it to be from a place of feeling and not from an academic place, and that was really the start of this whole journey of many other things that have come out of that, really. But that was the driving force behind it, was to demystify the music.
Yeah.
Another question, if that's okay, for maybe Claire and possibly Nick. But before I ask it, I was going to say, Claire, one of the things I said to Julie while we were watching it again was that because you're so obviously passionate about the whole story, you've written it yourself, and you're singing it with passion as well. So often writers write with passion, but you actually wrote it and sang it with passion. So it was like, you know, double passion, so to speak. But it kind of gave the whole thing an authenticity. And I don't know whether Anna can answer this, but I wonder how much Anna fed off that authenticity. It felt authentic as a story. It felt very, very real. And it just seemed to infect everybody else, the people playing as well as Anna. So that was one question. And if we've got time, I've got another question about the ensemble aspect of it.
And what I think is interesting there is when I see Anna in performance there, I don't see what you do see sometimes elsewhere, somebody who's trying to be medieval, you know. I see a modern kid there who's experiencing this, you know, in the way that woman must have experienced it herself, because the whole architecture and artifice of courtly love and the codification, which I know very little about except from, you know, reading in English literature, and you know, which of course touches on all that, and Chaucer, you know, but inside that there's buried real people, and people who are tangible. I mean, Eleanor McAtane didn't go around in a great big mask. I mean, you know, she ran a country as well, so she, you know, she was a practical, in her terms, a practical modern woman at work. And it's only now, you know, you think, you know, oh, Tony Curtis was in that feature film, wasn't he? And you know, they all then behave like medieval people. And there's a whole, if you go to the 1950s, there's a whole medieval style of acting, you know.
Well, when you were giving me a reference point for her attitude, as it were, and you were saying, and it kind of became a coined thing throughout the promotion process, that she was a modern, like a pre-history Amy Winehouse. It was helpful, but yeah, so to like link both of those answers, trying to put something accessible and trying to perform it in a way that felt relative now, whilst performing it with the person who wrote it and is singing it and knows it in the context, in a way, you know, way back, in a way that I would never understand, because your brain is full of the most incredible historical facts and music that, you know, I was able to draw from you in terms of context, and then I was able to put it into my own. So I think you've got a nice balance of modern and old in there that makes that music come forward and makes the story accessible. Yeah, I know I said it before.
I think accessible, and I think if Beatrice walked into, you know, some music venue today, I mean, she would just know exactly what it was about, and they would know what she was about.
Yeah.
You know, because she you know, she has the talent, but she's actually no different in any ways. You know, she's trapped in all sorts of, you know, she has to be married to this guy, and the only way she can get any kind of love is to have what's basically, you know, completely adulterous, and I mean, it's Sir Lancelot again, isn't it? It's going to end in death. it has to, but that is the myth, and yet these women must have lived very near that to survive these marriages. I'm talking about in their imagination.
Oh yeah, that all of them must have had to have some kind of incredibly active inner. Yeah. Because the external was so contrived.
But also you could say there are women today who are living lives where they have to have this level of pretense for it to be at all possible.
Yeah.
You know, and they then wrestle with their emotions inside, but don't always reveal them, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I was going to say also that you had decided to set her as sort of in her younger age when she married. For one thing, the marrying at 13, which is said was was what happened. Usually, someone who was much older than them, and it's sort of like, well, like no wonder you start to have affairs and things like that because you know you're growing up. You got the you're kind of like the hormones are going and that, and yeah, you're going to be attracted to the younger guys. So it makes perfect sense. And that you married for contractual land gaining reasons, not for love. So it just seemed, and I think sometimes people in the modern era don't understand that, which makes it difficult sometimes for them to understand the to understand the period music. But you kind of put it in a setting that it should be fairly obvious that, you know, she married this old guy and this handsome guy who's interested in the same thing she's interested in with the music and that.
I mean, Claire writes her a line, which is the song is about, you know, the wife pining for a lover night, you know, am I too near the mark, you know? And poor old Gwilym, you know, who could have played rugby for Saracens by the sound of it, you know. I mean, I mean, you know, that world, I mean, well, we've met that world again, haven't we, later on, because when Byron is wandering around Italy, having affairs with young women who are married to elder men.
It's the 60s, I think.
And they create this notion of the Cavalier's Servante. And the husband sort of is sitting on the other side of the room while all this is going on. And it's either fine or he just pretends not to know, you know, because that's the way he's going to keep his woman.
I think there's a real parallel with the 60s. I think Anna and I talked about this early on. You know, there's the whole kind of free love thing. When he has this conversation with her, you know, well, jealousy is part of it. It's very much like those kind of conversations you said. But you know, yeah, it's free love. You don't own anybody, and it feels to me very much like that. And also the thing of, you know, bear in mind that this is, when I was writing, I had to be really careful. Beatrice didn't write. None of these people wrote, because people didn't write. So they were singer-songwriters. They were like, you know, Dylan or Simon and Garfunkel sitting in their bedroom strumming on their guitars. It was that much more that kind of process of feeling your way and improvising and just trying stuff out. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a lot of parallels with the 60s in terms of, you know, there's this whole kind of thing about what love should be, and we need to try and fit our lives to that, even though that actually isn't very comfortable in many ways, and obviously leads to all sorts of problems, also in the 60s.
Can I just ask you a question, Claire?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm user one. That's what I'm really called Trudy, but my computer.
Oh, hello, Trudy. You come a lot, and it's very nice to meet you, Trudy.
Hi, Trudy. Yes, I'm undercover, you know, user one. I just wanted to ask you if you spent much time in the Occitan region, southwest France, because.
Part of it, not so much around Provence. I've been sort of in the Alpes-Maritimes, so I've been in some of those sort of villages where they do speak the modern equivalent of Occitan.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because I spent quite a lot of holidays down. My cousin lived near Carcassonne and in that sort of area, and I've been to Chateau where they had ruined castles, where they had it was famous for troubadours back in the day, and particularly the instruments, but also that whole area. I've always been fascinated by the Cathars, and because it's got a history of strong women.
Yes.
And I think it's, like you say, it's interesting about the context, and it's very modern in a way, with sort of very different ideas. And when you're talking about the context, the whole sort of atmosphere is very evocative, I think, when you're in that region. And I was wondering how you felt about the actual language, Occitan, because I find something very appealing about it.
I agree. I mean, it's also interesting you mentioned the Cathars, because that is one of the themes in my head, of something I'd really love to write about. The persecution of the Cathars, I think, is absolutely fascinating, and there was a real correlation between the troubadour repertoire and the Cathars.
I couldn't even fathom that a song was written in a language that I'd never heard of. Do you know what I mean? Like, most of the time, even though we can't speak a language, we've heard of a language before. So I remember, like, we'd done a few shows already, and I was like, by the way, what is this in? Is this Latin? Is this, like, what is this? And you were like, it's, you know, it's Occitan. I was like, what is that? I've never heard that before in my life. And yeah, you explained it to me more, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it now, because it's still really alien to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the when you're singing it, there's a real colour in the language, which kind of, I think, affects how you sing. It's quite earthy to sing in some ways. What I should say is that the trouvère, so we had two sets of music in the show today, trouvère and troubadour, mostly troubadour, which is Occitan, but some of the pieces, the trouvère pieces, are in Old French. And that's a completely different language. In a way, Old French is the precursor to modern French. It's much closer. The pronunciation is different, but the words look similar, whereas Occitan is kind of like, there are words that look French, but there are a lot of feminine endings, so similar to Italian, like Calenda Maya, for example, that all of those are feminine ends. Every line ends with a feminine ending, and which, you know, obviously doesn't really happen in French in the same kind of way. So I went to Barcelona and the area around there, and actually, if you look at Catalan, it's quite similar. I kind of the pronunciation is different, but actually looking at Catalan written down, I was thinking, oh, this is like Occitan. There's definitely a Catalan equivalent, and it's kind of like a bit of Catalan mixed with a bit of French together.
Yeah, I definitely hear the Frenchy bit in it. And the other bits are, you know, different.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, yes, I think it's a poetic language, and there are other repertoires, like the Canticas de Santa Maria, which is a Spanish repertoire, wonderful songs which we've done in retreat. Actually, no, we haven't done them in retreat. We've done Libra of Mel. But that's a wonderful repertoire. That's written in Galician, and again, that's a poetic language. Not you know, doesn't survive really now, apart from in a couple of places. But it's there were kind of poetic languages that kind of flourished with poetry that kind of now are dead or dying. And I suppose, yeah, there is something about the earthiness of it, I think, that I really enjoy singing. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yes, I mean, I think it is incredibly, you know, the language, the scenery, the everything is a whole, isn't it? I think that's what comes across, and the sort of the passion and the relationships. It is a complete way of life that I think comes across through the music.
There was there's a rap group in Marseille, apparently, that is trying to keep Occitan alive.
Oh wow!
So, you know, the last I heard, maybe it's died by now, but they were. Giles, have you got anything to say? Because again, Giles has done some of this repertoire with another singer, well, several other singers, but particularly Viv, I'm thinking of.
I heard about that rap group. Yeah. I haven't heard them though.
I'm going to look them up.
Next time we do that show, Claire, you know what you need to do to keep it current and modern.
Okay, I'll bear it in mind.
Unsung Heroine, hip hop. I'll just change my shoes for like trainers, and we'll just give it a modern flavour. I'll wear a backwards cap. Nick, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. That's for the walk down.
Yeah, I won't stroll down the aisle. I'll like flip and backflip down the aisle.
That I must see. But is there anything else that you'd say about the music and what you're? I mean, is it worth you talking about what you're playing? Because we haven't talked about, you know, this is single line melody. All this repertoire.
I mean, going back partly to the last question, I was thinking during that actually, I mean, it's great to put are playing in the context of a drama as well, because
Definitely.
so often you don't get that as a performer. You know, you're trying to get something off a page, but if you've got the extra dimension there, you know, it makes it so much easier to do. And a bit like Nick was saying about the repetition of it, if you need to hear it a lot of times to start to get it at all, don't you?
Yes.
It is quite tricky, but after a while it does get.
It's not dissimilar to going, you know, I can remember going to an Irish pub on the West Coast, and I didn't understand any of it. And then after about a month, well, there was a lady involved, but after about
a Guinness,
after a month, you began to get the songs. You began to get them.
Yeah.
And then one day, some very old lady sits in a corner and completely unaccompanied sings a song, and you think, "Oh, now I get it."
Yeah.
Because there are ways and ways of it being given you.
But the other weird thing about it is, of course, all you're getting is an interpretation of it by us. I mean, we no idea how it would have actually sounded. I mean, you know, that's the weird thing. You know, it feels like we're creating something new. Actually.
You think she might not like it if she came back?
I hate our interpretation. It's quite true. She might say, "No, you don't do it like this. You do it like
this." She'd be totally bemused.
It's like, you know, Mr. Moog taking, you know, Beethoven onto his synthesizer and saying, "Well, that's how it should really sound."
Yeah.
On the subject that Giles touched on, which is like the ensemble bit of it, I don't know. It struck me, Claire, that you wrote this in 2010. It feels like a labour of love. It's not something that we've ever seen before. I don't know how common this kind of show is, but it was really unusual. And what we noticed in the stage performance in London was that we could actually read the words to the songs. So you could actually just follow some of the story. But what was interesting, what Giles just said, is that we didn't have that for this filmed stage version. And it felt like a real ensemble, that even though the musicians were not speaking words or singing words, and even if they were singing words, we couldn't understand it. It's a language we don't understand. Nevertheless, Anna would speak her lines, then the music would start, and the singing. Sometimes the musicians exchanged a glance or two, and because Nick was choosing who to focus on, it became like a real ensemble. Where I don't know if that's what you ever envisaged, Claire, when you actually wrote it. You know, because you think on the face of it, well, there's maybe a singer, two singers, and there's an actress and musicians in the back, but it didn't turn out that way. It felt like much more.
Well, I think that's partly due to the strength of the narratives. You know, once you have a thread like that, and if you're just tweaking that all the way through, and you're not trying to do a platform concert, a lot of it falls naturally into place, in the way that you know, Greek drama is a mixture of choral and music and actor, and I'm sure you've seen performances where it doesn't fall into place at all, and you think, "Oh my God, get the actor back on, please." You know, you've got. You know, did you do any Greek drama at college, Anna?
Yeah, we did. Except
I mean, it is finding and to integrate it and to give it meaning is very hard. You know, particularly when you're being asked to, you know, rock around the room in some sort of strange fashion, you know, extempore. But I mean, well, once you've got that thread, and the thread doesn't need to be brutal, you know. The thread isn't brutal, you know. I mean, it just sort of meanders, but that's kind of her story. And I think Claire's chosen the clearly wonderful moments where the right music hits the emotion of the story. Because you could do another version of that where it didn't, you know. And that's the knowledge of someone who knows why those songs were being sung, and why at that point in the narrative you have to go to that piece of music rather than another. I mean, you know, it'd be, for me, it'd be quite difficult to take any of those pieces and and switch them around.
Some of them you couldn't switch around. I mean, no. I suppose.
Which wasn't true of Vision. I mean, in Vision, there were ones.
No, with Vision, it didn't matter so much. I mean, in many places it didn't matter. But that's the nature of the music, because the music is quite similar. Whereas, and also the context. I mean, Hildegard's language is quite complex. Whereas this is, this is all about love, and the story is about love. So I suppose when I'm writing, and I mean, and for all the things I'm writing, with the exception of Vision, because Vision is a kind of different kind of piece, I think with everything else that I've written, what I'm really interested in, and the reason why I love bringing together music and drama, is the insight that the music can give into the kind of inner life of the character. And also how the music can take the character to somewhere new. So it can often music is memory. So, in this piece, there are lots of moments where music is memory, where she's transported back to she's 9 years old and she remembers hearing that. And she remembers Rainbow's song at the very beginning. There are, so that, which music does. I mean, music and smell are the two things that actually do transport you back in time to moments in your life. I think there's a real truism of that. And this is where I can talk about my great love, Dennis Potter. Does anyone know who Dennis Potter is? He's a wonderful TV player.
He's the father of Sally, who is a fast bowler for England, or what?
Wrong answer. Wonderful TV playwright who experimented with, lots of things, but he particularly used popular music in very interesting dramatic ways, often to get to tying in with memory, but often to underpin the text in sometimes sarcastic or interesting ways, and not necessarily always going with the narrative, sometimes going against the narrative. He's absolutely brilliant, and I rewatch all his stuff. That you can watch some of them on 4 on demand. And I've got a box set of Dennis Potter, which I never get bored of watching, because I learn so much from watching them. And he is a master of how you bring together music and use it to give insight to a character, I think. And that's kind of what I try and do. And that for me is interesting, and I think that there is real, there are riches I still have fun exploring in doing that, because there is something, there's something about music that speaks very closely to the heart, isn't there? That's why we all love it. And there's something personal that speaks to a character, and I really love exploring that, I suppose, is what I would say. It's the thing that makes me write, these pieces.
I'm 100% here, by the way. I just need to stay online because I'm working from home today.
Yes, Anna's working.
I'm still here. No one's just.
We're very glad you're here, Anna.
I can still talk, I promise. That's really interesting. That sometimes there is like a person or an artist that informs how you do what you do, and Dennis seems to be that one for you. And it's always really lovely to find that one that keeps you creating. It like informs it in that way. I've definitely had actresses and people that do that for whatever I do in my career as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the most exciting. I mean, it's very different from music, actually. For music, I don't, perhaps because it's a new thing in my life, writing, I get so excited when I kind of see something that I find inspiring.
Yeah.
It really is, it really excites me to think,
I have those moments,
they've done it, and that's so brilliant. And I just think it's so brilliant. Another person I love is Abby Morgan, who wrote River and The Hour and The Split, which I don't love as much as the others, but and again, she uses music in very interesting ways, really inspirationally, but is a wonderful writer, and her characters are so well drawn, and I often rewatch her again. It's like having a masterclass. I just, you know, watch things again and I think that's just so brilliant. That's so brilliant how she put that together. And it's kind of part of my, well, because it's new to me, it's kind of part of my learning, I suppose, about how to do things. I'm still learning and still making mistakes, but that never stops up now.
That bit never stops.
Does anyone else have any questions? Just shut me up. No?
No more sent to me. No
more? In that case, I think we should probably wind things up.
Let's go to the pub. You've got 5 minutes.
Exactly. Let's actually go and open another bottle of wine.
with that fresh cut out on the town.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
team,
you.
Giles, Anna, Nick.
Is Ariane all right? Is she just vanished?
She's fine. She was on the phone to her brother in Germany, apparently. I've just had a text.
All right.
He suddenly phoned, so she sent her apologies.
Our many thanks.
So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for tuning in. It means a lot to us.
Yeah.
We're excited. We're excited about the fact that it exists in film form, in a portable way, and it could be shown again and again. And the lovely thing about it is, if you were shooting it on stage, you may not get that church again, or you certainly couldn't do it on a continual basis. But there it is. It's a wonderful.
It's also now available to my agent in a way that wasn't before, because it was not in London, and when it was in London, they weren't free, so they were never able to watch it. So they're really pleased now that they can actually see the show. So that works out for them as well. That's great.
It just seems a real opportunity to disseminate the work in a way that wasn't possible before.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad we did it, honestly. So a bittersweet blessing from coronavirus there.
It is, and yes, I think you asked, what is that? Is that why? Yes, it is. I mean, I would have loved to have done it, but I don't think it would have probably been. You know, we were so focused on staging stuff and touring that no, it wouldn't have happened without coronavirus, for sure. So,
thanks again.
And our wonderful funders. Arts Council, Gilson Cop Foundation and Ambash Charitable Trust, because they put up the money, because obviously we needed that. So thank you to them. Thank you to all of you. And do spread the word. It's available for a week, and then we probably will release it again in the spring, I hope. But do spread the word and encourage people to watch who haven't seen it yet. And thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, thank you for being there.
You guys.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Nick, for a wonderful job as well. Bye.